let's get into it. So my first question is this, and let's start with Jean. We'll go Jean, Fred, Jose. Can you tell I'm a teacher? Yeah. So I'm not even going to get into what CRT is. I'm just going to say one thing, which is right now in America, there are 36 bills introduced this year that are essentially prohibiting discussions of everything from race, gender, and any other issues that might make, I'm just going to say it, white parents or maybe their kids uncomfortable. And this is 36 and possibly counting. They're called CRT, but I want you to talk to us about what that really means. But my first question is, how do these book bans, education bans, affect the work you do, Jean? And I want to know how it affects you on a personal level as well. So how is it affecting your day-to-day work? And how is it affecting you personally?
I'm going to tackle the personally part first because it's the one that I am most passionate and connective about. And I think about it, I was that GT gifted kid. I was excelling in my classes. I always wanted A's. But where this takes me is that I always had to read about histories that honored other people, never people that looked like me. And so where was the honoring and the contributions? Because I'm thinking from a mindset of there isn't a building in the Capitol, our government buildings, that hasn't been touched by Black hands. And so when we go back and we try to erase it and we try to make these laws that, are, for lack of better words, a bubble for certain folks, I'm like, I understand you want every kid to have a safe space, but I think about little Black Ebony Darnell. I know I'm Jean Darnell, but I think about little Black Ebony Darnell, who was sitting in the classroom wanting her classroom to be a safe space, but then it turned to a spotlight when we started talking about my ancestors being enslaved. You don't know what it's like to be the only kid in a classroom, and you're talking about something as sensitive and as intense as slavery, as, civil rights, as, lynching and all those things, and you're the only one there. My safe space evaporated, it disintegrated, and it went from safe space to spotlight. And I don't think people realize how impactful it is. It changed me. There isn't a Black kid that doesn't have an inward story. There isn't a Black kid that hasn't felt like they were, like I said, in the spotlight of the fire, so to speak, of all of the negative things that happen to Black people. So it motivates me, because you can't understand where you're going if you haven't learned how you got here to begin with. And so that erasure I take personally, and I want the kids to wake up and hear and see and realize, because it's the youth that consistently have led the charge of progress. And so I'm looking for them to do that. And I, as a participant, whether I wanted to participate in it or not, I have to use my platform. So you rest assured that I'm going to make sure that the windows and reflections and the mirrors are there in the books, because 30 years ago, I can attest to you, it wasn't there. And they're talking about safe space for some, but we need to have safe space for all, because I was never safe, especially when it came around to sensitive topics like, racism, like enslavement, like Black History Month, and why is it that we only get a certain amount of time and maybe a paragraph of acknowledgement, but then we spend months studying stuff that I have no connection to, but I have to honor. And so it hits me on a personal level beyond means. So I'm gonna cut myself short so I can let someone else speak.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to hear from you, Fred. How is this affecting you on the personal and also professional level?
Yeah, I'll start with the personal first. It's deeply traumatizing, right? And I don't want to mince words, because that's what it is. As Jean said, similarly, I went to a school where I was called everything under the sun, right? I went to a school where I was not only erased in the moments that I existed, it was merely with a spotlight to make me feel different, right? And as we have what I think of as a renaissance of Black and brown and marginalized authors attempt to speak to not just the atrocities that face certain communities, but the mere existence of certain communities, right? The fact that an author can say, I am here, I have been here, this community is here, we exist, and something as simple as that could be seen as an assault on the very fabric of this nation. It's deeply harmful. It keeps me up at night as an author, right? As a person, as a Black man, as a son, as a fiance, as a friend. It keeps me up because I know that if this is successful, and it has been successful thus far, we will be ushered into a time that might even be darker than the times in which I came up, right? So that's from the personal. And I would say from the professional, I love that question because I said recently on my Instagram or Twitter, one of them, that so rarely in all of this are Black and brown and marginalized parents, students, and authors asked their opinions about this moment, right? I've read 40 semi-articles in just the last 3 months about my book being banned, or a parent ripping my book up in front of a child, or saying my book can't be placed back in a library, or saying the title is racist because it says to be a better white person. And not once have I been asked how I feel. Not once have I seen a Black or brown parent give perspective, be asked for perspective. So, it's not only troubling, but it's a detriment to every single thing I stand for as an author. But, more logistically, I'm left to wonder, and I said this a few weeks ago, how does this impact the ability of us to even do the work, right? How's this, because people don't realize, like, I'll give you a quick way in which this works, right? There's a lot of gatekeeping to write anything, right? So the first thing you have to do is 9 times out of 10, get a white agent to want to rep you as a marginalized creator, as a Black author. Then that white agent has to go to white institutions, the HarperCollins and the Simon Schusters and all these different places, and get them to want to be interested in you and find an editor who is interested in your voice. So there's all this gatekeeping of whiteness that you have to go through. And I wonder, and at the end of that gatekeeping, right, there's somebody up top floating around in the ether who's like, hey, can this make money? Quite frankly, it's very rare that the question is, can this make change? More times than not in a capitalist society, the question is, can this make money? So what happens to those authors when you get to that point of, can this make money? But then you look around the country and see countless states where you can't even exist on bookshelves, right? So how is that going to impact advances? How is that going to impact book deals? How is it going to impact the very nature of how this works, the very opportunities for Black and brown authors to even have, right? So that's how it's impacted me, and just kind of where my heart is and what I've been thinking about lately in regards to all of this.
Thanks for sharing that. And that's why I opened with that question, because I'm really sick of not hearing that. and the media even covering this. We really need to be amplifying Black people and people of colors whose voices are just being silenced, and then they're not being asked how they feel about it. So we need to do more of that. Jose, what about you? How is this affecting you both on a professional level and on a personal level?
I think something that a lot of us who've been educating for more than 10 years recognize is that if you ever taught dangerously, you always knew your job was on the line, whether you were in a progressive state, state that had a union, didn't have a union. It's those of us who come in with full face, with full heart, understand full well that as soon as we step in the classroom, even just the way we present, like the thing is, being a big black man as I am, I don't just come in with what I look like. I also come in with all the knowledges that allowed me to become an educator. And so something people often don't understand is like these book bans are indeed political and they are personal because it makes it more likely for Black educators and other educators of color to be targeted simply by how they look because they are more likely to do the things that folks are considering dangerous. And what's also fascinating about that too is that as I take a personal look at it, I went to public school on the Lower East Side at a time when the Jewish population was moving, a white Jewish population was moving from that Lower East Side to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, but there were still a lot of holdovers and folks who said, we're going to stay in our neighborhood because we actually appreciate the point that we're at right now, which is very multicultural. You had a lot of Black students from all across the Western Hemisphere, but you also had a lot of Dominican, Puerto Rican students. You had specifically Chinese students because we were a Chinatown adjacent. So we were learning from each other, all sorts of cultures, but we were also learning from women who were Jewish and proudly so. So not only was I growing up in a Catholic household, I was also learning about Judaism from my own teachers, right? And the rich history, not just about the Holocaust, which I think is critical to a lot of this narrative, right? But also about the joys of being Jewish. We were learning about what it meant to actually like be happy in one's religion and how a lot of that religion kept the faith going. And so, of course, too, I was blessed to be part of the boys club. And after school, that's when I also learned about how a Black activists in the civil rights movement were able to continue to push the struggle forward, but not just in sorrow, but also to keep our chins up, that we also had a story. But then what I also recognized after I started getting into the all boys Catholic schools and all that other stuff was that we were already at a point when our curriculum was very white centric and specifically Anglo-Saxon, European, this foreign, this curriculum that continually centered whiteness, right? And so if we were already there, how come these book bans are pushing back against a thing that they've already won in so many ways, right? Only within the last 10 years was there really a conversation around how to diversify books. And we didn't even really get to that point because there were more representations of animals, for example, as the lead characters in young adult books than there were of Black people, Latinx people, so on and so forth. So for us to really think about what it meant to truly integrate us into the stories and the lives and the culture of America would necessarily mean a disruption to a thing that's been happening for centuries on end. And so I implore everybody to think about what it would mean to not just pull Black people in when it's sad stuff, when it's angry stuff. And this is the way I'm using with my own 10-year-old. So that's why I'm thinking about my own child. It's like, it's good for us to think about struggle. And it's good for us to think about what it means to fight. It's also good to see us in our fullest humanities. It's good for y'all to see when we are happy, when we are joyous, when we want to cheer one another, so that we can actually get to this American experiment that so many of us have actually fought for, right? Either we're going to get to a point where we say to each other, this was a good experiment, we tried our best, or we're actually going to make that thing happen. And in 2020, there may have been a glimpse where people said to themselves, okay, there is a fight here and there's just so much more to go. But of course, all these book bans do is push us so far back, perhaps even further to the point where they might even try to make reading illegal. And that would be wild for us to think about in this moment in time, but not too far-fetched.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And also just emphasizing that it's important that we also teach the joys of our cultures and religion. And I think that's what we do as educators. And that's one of my biggest fears with these bans is that they're saying they're calling these bans banning things that make people uncomfortable. And that to me just shows the racism and all of it, that they think that when you're talking about people who aren't white, it's going to make people uncomfortable. Like, why are they assuming it's going to make anyone uncomfortable, right? I mean, it's also going to make people feel welcome and accepted. So I have two more questions, but I'm going to fast forward to the last one because I want to make, there's so many people with so many good points in the chat. So this is what I think a lot of people are here tonight to hear from the three of you, which is a lot of teachers are struggling right now. They're in this really awful position of wanting to teach what they've always been teaching, the complex history, the complex, beautiful, heartbreaking story of America. And they're being told that they have to choose between that and their paycheck, that and getting attacked online, attacked in their communities. So it's another two-part question. My question, we'll go Jean, Fred, and Jose again, because I like consistency. What advice do you have for teachers right now? And also what advice do you have for young people living in these places that are attacking what they can learn? So Jean, what advice do you have for both teachers and students right now?
For teachers, because I'm on the front line, just like you, Sarah, I first want to tell them to hold on. You know, we didn't get into this with lightness of heart. We know it was going to be an uphill battle every which way, doesn't matter what day it is. I would tell them to hold on. And then don't forget, we're living in a time, I call this observational literacy, for lack of better words, because our kids are taking a step back and they're looking at things, you know, they're processing in a way different because we live in this connective global society. So they're looking at things and they're responding. So I want our youth to start using their whatever platform they want, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Snapchat, whatever social media, whatever organization they can do, get organized, get fired up, because just like it was for Dr. King, just like it was for Huey Newton, just like it was for Malcolm X, it was those kids that were out there on the streets, on the news, that were getting slaughtered, that really made people wake up. And it's our kids right now that's challenging the old school, traditional, we've always done it that way. The kids are like, no, they're cutting out the fat. They're getting down to the meat of the problem, and they're doing it in 60 seconds flat. So I would tell the kids, hey, what you're doing, what you're thinking, put it out there. Let that go viral. Get in their faces with it, because that's how we're going to orchestrate change. When you find the connections, because you're using your own investigative skills, and that's where teachers can help. Teach them that critical thinking, teach them that analyzation, teach them how to apply the skill sets, not for a test mastery. No, apply it to your life. Put it out there in ways that you can take tangible steps instead of just complaining. Orchestrate, organize, proliferate, so to speak, the mindset that you want to have out there any which way possible. And that goes for kids and that goes for teachers. That's what I would say is my number one platform, because we're all connected. We are a global society. What is happening in America is happening in Venezuela, it's happening in China, and we got to all come together and battle this in a unified and instant way. That's what I would advise.
Thank you so much, Jean. That's so inspiring. And I keep emphasizing this too, that kids are learning 24/7, and they're on TikTok. TikTok is a space that they can't ban. I mean, Trump tried to, right? But unsuccessfully. Kids are learning on there. Kids come to me and show me TikToks every day and say, we just talked about this in class. Check out this TikTok. And then they want to know if it's correct, because they're going there. And yeah, I agree. This generation isn't going to have it. So if they can't learn it in school, they can learn it elsewhere, and we can help guide them with those skills. So thank you, Jean. I'm a little more hopeful. Fred, what advice do you have for teachers and young people dealing with this really these fascist laws right now?
So another question I love. Thank you. I'm going to start with teachers, and not just teachers. I'm going to say educators, because I view educators as parents, librarians, teachers in the classroom, authors, so on and so forth, right? And the thing I want to say is it's going to actually be surprising to some people, but I think that we place too much of a weight of the expectations of progress on young people, right? Because to the point, I actually saw somebody a second ago, I think it was Tia, said in the chat, Gen Z is on it with social justice. I live to support them as much as possible. And I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that young people are in a better place and better suited than any generation that we've had prior. But the thing is, I also on a regular basis, I have a brother-in-law who teaches in a high school in Texas, right? And unlike Sarah, he's not in a progressive level or anything like that. And he was actually just telling me yesterday that some of his students were making TikToks for Black History Month, his white students, pretending to pick cotton, right? And that, you know, when they saw, because a lot of them listen to Joe Rogan, for example, and so they were arguing amongst each other that they could say the N-word, arguing with Black students. And I say that not to villainize or demonize or tell anybody on here that they're wrong. So I don't think that that's the case. I think it's a matter of understanding what our roles are and that these young people actually still deeply need us. And right now, I completely understand the dangers in having courageous conversations and doing the things that sometimes you know are necessary because we did, quite frankly, in a capitalist society, it is your paycheck versus doing the right thing sometimes. And I get it as an author. There's things in my own books that I wish I could have said, but I'm like, they're going to ban it. They ended up banning it anyway, so I might as well have just said the things nonetheless. But I think that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we all got into the things that we do because we understood that we were the gatekeepers of the future, the gatekeepers of progress, the gatekeepers of change. And there are always ways to circumvent these systems, right? Like we're talking about educators having banned book clubs. We're talking about educators creating other resources. We're talking about educators forging alliances similar to what Sari has with the Teachers Unify against gun violence, right? We have to be creative. We can't just say, oh, I lean into the young people. And I'm not saying that that's solely what was said, but we have to understand that this is adults versus adults, right? And there are lines drawn in the sand. And I said this earlier, it's not a matter of left, right now, what it's a matter of is right-wing fascism. This conversation that we're having tonight is a conversation about fascism, right? So if you are not on the side of combating fascism, you are inherently enabling it. Each one of us has some type of privilege, some type of resource that we can leverage to be in this fight. Every single one of us. So I implore everybody to do that, whatever that looks like. And in terms of the young people, I think that Jean made a phenomenal point, and this goes back to the great point that Tia did make, that my hope is in them, right? My hope is that we can lead them. My hope is that we can pour into them. And what I would say to them, and I say to them now through my writing and just through knowing young people, is you have more communication tools, more learning tools than any generation that has ever been on this planet. Use them, make your voices heard, per what Jean said. If CNN is not interviewing you, if Fox News, NPR, Mother Jones, whomever is not interviewing you, well, you have 10,000 followers. Talk about it, right? Talk about it. You make your voices heard. You message your congressman. You message the influencers. You message the celebrities. You message CNN, right? Because that is where we are at right now. Everyone has to play their part, whether they are a parent, educator, librarian, once again, author, student. We have to all understand, once again, and my last point again is that a line has been drawn in the sand. And if we don't all do something about it, per Sari's point earlier, this is worse than it was the last time I was on here. By the next time I come on here, if something's not done about it, if all of us don't do something on this call, it will be far worse. We might get to the point where this call is actually illegal.
And that's not hyperbole. This is not normal. It's an abnormal thing to be living in an authoritarian fascist, bordering on fascist society. We're still a democracy, but if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's because it shouldn't be normal to be in this situation, especially when you grew up in the United States of America, saying to yourself that famous saying, it can't happen here. It's happening here. And so yes, I love that you bring up the point that it needs to be intergenerational. And I also love that what you and Jean are both saying about there's other ways to get your media out there, your sources out there. And listen, if you feel scared because of your job that they're going to come after you, come to me. I have no problem sharing your story anonymously. Same with Fred. I'm sure I don't want to speak for Fred and Jose and Jean, but there's other people out there who can share what you're dealing with. So you can keep your job because capitalism, right? But you can still get it out there. And so I think, we need to work together, like intergenerationally, interstate, all around the globe. So Jose, what advice do you have for teachers and young people dealing with what's going on right now?
Well, there's a couple of things that are worth thinking about. One is that I got in trouble a lot during my 15-year career. And the one thing that I always relied on is my relationships with students, not from a transactional standpoint, but for a way for us to say, like, I'm trying my best here, and I want to get to know you and your families and your communities. And I allowed my students, I mean, not that I could stop them, and I let them keep talking about all the great things that were happening in class, the ways that they were learning, the ways that they felt affirmed. Because a big part of the reason why we want different text in classrooms and we want different conversations around social justice and culturally responsive education is because it actually allows students to feel like they are more included, and that includes across race, class, gender, disability. Whenever you talk about justice, it's about examining the reasons why our students can't get a great education and the ways that we can actually rectify that. Which leads me to my second point. Thinking about how to actually engage in the conversation around so-called critical race theory. What I would prompt everyone is to really go read what critical race theory is. And I always tell people, after I've synthesized it and broke down the academic ease, which I think is wonderful. However, for our context, you need to be able to lean into the language and say, actually, it's not that critical race theory isn't taught in our classrooms. This is what critical race theory is. Number one, that racism exists, and two, that we can do something about it. And then you pose the question, would you like the truth to be taught to your kids? That's it. Like, let that be the frame that you engage parents in all across the board. And unfortunately, we got so caught up in saying, no, we're not teaching critical race theory, that unfortunately it misguided so many people towards a definition that was never there to begin with. Whereas if we deeply engage with the text that Bell and Crenshaw and so many other Black scholars actually came up with to have this examination, you would see multiple ways to say, hey, we are very thoughtful about how we engage students as individuals and as collectives together. And so the last point I'd like to make, because I'm trying to make sure we have time for questions, right, is that we need to engage parents early and often, not just when our kids get in trouble, but the beginning of September. We need to know their names, where they're coming from, and not just to adapt it or to like use it for our own personal benefit, but really to deeply engage so that people actually know who you are as a teacher. And if you haven't done so already, do so now. Do not wait. And then once you build that relationship, you get to have the conversation that's a lot harder because, as Mr. Joseph already mentioned, right? Like, if you really want to get the people who are getting ignored consistently, there's no such thing as a voice for the voiceless. It's a voice for the consistently and structurally ignored. So when you are consistent about that relationship with parents, with community, you can get those stories out in a way that is actually not performative, but transformational, because that way mainstream media can't stop us, right? Like, these big platforms that are out there that are consistently blocking our voices can't stop that sort of mass movement. And in the way that we don't have financial capital, we have human capital, because we are so trusted in our classrooms in the ways that we are.
I would piggyback on that because here's the thing that I don't think some folks take in consideration. The only people at the school board meetings making these ruckuses and creating the extra chaos people that have their time to do that. It's not my mom, that's the hard worker working 3 jobs. It's the ones that's sitting there with nothing better to do other than to create a situation that wasn't there to begin with, but it serves your purpose and agenda of getting this removed. No. Invite parents that are, if they can't get there physically, their weight should carry virtually. Their text, whatever way they can communicate. We always want to meet our kids where they're at. Let's meet our parents where they're at. Let's meet, let's get their platform, however way we can communicate, and they can reciprocate and get that communication back, because it's not just these particular parents. We have to get the message out to all parents and then let them interact with it and let that voice speak.
Thank you, Jean. You got so many snaps just now. Like, I just almost screamed over you, because yes, all of that. And, there's Moms for Liberty. We hear a lot about that group. I'm starting to see people in my comments say, oh, well, we have parents organizing on Facebook to combat that. And there really are more of us than them. They're just louder. And we can be loud. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but we're all pretty loud in here. And there's a lot more of us than them. So I think that's so important. Jose, I thank you so much for also bringing up the fact, and I've been writing about this a lot too, that like we fell into the trap of being like, CRT, we don't teach that, which made it once again seem like it's some dirty thing that's taught somewhere. There's nothing wrong with critical race theory. In fact, it's a very important framework for anyone to understand the systems of inequity in society. And so thank you for emphasizing that, Jose. And I think we all need to run with that messaging, because I'm really sick of people thinking that critical race theory is something evil or bad. It's actually very important to understand the world we live in. So let's open it up to the group. So I noticed that Stephanie said a number of things in the chat, but I wanted to bring you in because you had a really good point, and I can't even find it anymore because the chat is out of control, which I love. But Stephanie, come on in.
Are you talking to me?
I think so. Let's,
okay.
Yes. Yeah, I am talking to you, Stephanie.
Okay, which point was it that I made that was?
Whatever question you want to make,
jump in. I had made an observation that kind of piggybacking on what Jean and Fred had said about no one's really thinking about what people of color feel about these things. It's all about kind of centering white folks and like people who look like me and how they feel. I think when you look at what DeSantis just did in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill, you have the same issue there, where how can I as a teacher be asked to ignore something that's so central to one of my students' identities that they may be struggling with, and now there's this kind of threat hanging over my head about, how do I address that? Because I might be the only adult in that kid's life who, gives a damn.
And I just saw some really powerful testimony. I think it must have been in Florida, from young kids sharing that they fear bullying, and worse, if they don't have those spaces to learn about people like them who might be gay or queer, and it's a problem. And we want to be there for the kids, and it's scary when we can't. So Fred and Jose, Jean, do you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure I understand.
Not my watch.
I was gonna jump in on that one. I think that's an excellent point. Oftentimes, especially in certain communities, right? I think that one of the things that's lost on people is that sometimes these young people, all they have is that one educator willing to see their humanity, right? I mean, in fact, sometimes all they have is that one book, right? How many people in here can count the amount of times they've read a book and you're just like, I am here, I am alive, someone sees my existence. What they're attempting to do, and I'm thinking about Ron DeSantis right now, what they're attempting to do is completely erase parts of humanity. Like people, our everyday neighbors are trying to erase their very existence, right? So that we go back to this dark age of the only thing that you're allowed to be is a white cis het Judeo-Christian American, right? This false mythos of baseball, hot dogs, and white picket fences. And as we rip back the layers of this false identity that America has held on to, they're scared, right? And when somebody is scared about something like that, that means that you're doing the right thing. That's such an excellent point that you make, that we have to all realize, each one of us in our own individual roles, we might be the only thing that kid has.
It's so powerful. I want to bring in Catherine Fetzer. Can you share your question with us?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was looking around. Oh, what a wonderful discussion we're having. We do have I teach at a deaf school at MSSD in Washington, D.C. And we teach a lot of students about keys that are really important. And Black deaf kids have limited access oftentimes to information, limited access to a lot of things. So we really emphasize working on teaching them, exposing them, making sure that they have every resource possible to interact with the world. So I've seen a lot of this discussion about banning books, and a lot of things about, certainly this affects Black deaf students incredibly strongly. And so I am just soaking all of this conversation in, but I do have a question about, I'm super thankful for my school because they're very supportive of critical race theory being taught, and they're open to discussions about that and leading those discussions. And so the teachers, we have students that certainly support critical race theory in classrooms. So I'm just curious about your own experiences when you do talk about that in the classroom. What is that like for you?
Jose, you want to jump in there for that?
I was actually going to let Jean go, but I'll do this one.
Okay, we're looking at Jean go after you.
Yeah, absolutely, because she's dope too. I'm thinking about how so much of this conversation is about the context and being both careful about putting too much weight on your Black students if you're in a diverse space, but also giving them enough agency so that they can speak for themselves. And that's a delicate balance. I'm reminded of the book Not Light But Fire by Matthew Kay, which I highly recommend to everyone, because something that occurs consistently is that if you're culturally responsive, then you're going to make mistakes along the way. Where you win is when you decide that you as the adult are going to do the work so that other folks shouldn't have to, which goes right back to our student activist conversation and how our younger generations shouldn't have to be activists when adults need to get it together. And then there's this other part too, where we ensure that our students who are marginalized, whether through race, class, gender, disability, sexual orientation, that they feel like when they express something, it's their time to do so, and they get to do so at their pace, right? Because this can be really hard, and often as we become adults, it becomes traumatic. I remember when I tried to bring in Chinua Achebe's book in high school, and the teacher wasn't prepared for me to do that, and in fact asked me to rebuke the text around that issue. And I was like, this is me, a Black student in an honors class. That's rubbish, right? In an honors class, trying to bring in even a small conversation about race and slavery, and I was asked immediately to dismiss all of it and apologize for bringing in a text, which was wild. Things Fall Apart is a classic. And yet, and still, because of that experience, I think about the thousands, if not millions of students who on a daily basis feel like they have to do extra lifting for adults who need to be doing their own work, but then also for their peers who, once the adult sets the example, can either amplify or traumatize that child in very serious ways. So I would ask everybody to be thoughtful, to be truly balanced, not in the Fox News sort of way. All due no respect, just all disrespect. And then in third is really about ensuring that the student, once you've had that reflection time, that you let the students then say to themselves, let me get some time to just reflect on my own, on the things I've heard, on the things I've seen, on the ways that I've grown, which is very much like what you would do when you exercise, when you walk. Sometimes you need a little break just to encapsulate everything and let it marinate for a bit before you move on to whatever's next. I hope that's helpful. That's just me being the classroom teacher there. So
That, to me, that was so powerful and helpful.
I
Jean?
would say when kids speak, do something with it. Because if they're going to put themselves out there and divulge their heartfelt feelings about it, you better rest assured they're waiting to see what you're going to do. And if you don't turn that into something, they're never going to open up to you again. You have felt them, and you need to take it that literally. I would definitely say make sure you model for them what it is that you want them to do. So case in point with me, my kids, I got in trouble because I took on, my kids were upset, they were graduating seniors, my Black girls, and they had to wear nude shoes. And the argument was what constituted nude. It was nude that was only light beige tan, not nude that was honey, caramel, cocoa brown like me. And so tactfully, I had to say, you need to understand what's new to you ain't new to me. And they laughed at me when I said it, but that insensitivity and understanding where that child was coming from. And as far as I'm not going to put on your color nude, I'm going to put on what's nude and matches me. And the fact that they could not understand that was a missed opportunity, because that kid spoke up and they voiced them, even if it was on the smallest platform of what shoes to wear to walk across the stage. It was enough, and you should have validated them. And when I saw that it didn't happen, I was like, no, I can't be your librarian and see this happen and not take some action. So when my kids saw me taking that action, they was like, okay, Miss Darnell cares. Miss Darnell's going to do something with. She's not just going to listen to me complain. She's going to take my complaints and turn it into action. And when I did that, the kids were more responsive. They were more, and then it forced everyone else to listen, because when they were venting to their friends that, were non-Black or, weren't of color, their friends were listening. And they were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I never thought about it that way. I read it and applied it to myself because, I look like the majority, but I never thought from your mindset. And that is where we're going to get the combat and fighting on CRT, progressing our cause and giving our kids a voice. Little micro everyday things like that.
I thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to quote you. Jean said, if kids speak, make sure you do something about it. When my students said, Miss, why do we keep just learning about dead white people every day? The next day I made sure as hell we didn't talk about that. Imagine if I just followed with the lesson plans, because it's on the regents. That's important. And my relationship with that was in September. From then on, that class, we were cool. It was like a turning point with us. You got to listen to them. Thank you. So I just wanted Tim's up next, but Cicely, I just want to read what you wrote because it was such a powerful response. You wrote, Cicely wrote, as for me as a deaf Black person, I often hear from my deaf Black friends who are teachers who told of experience of school putting the responsibilities of promoting anti-bias curriculum as if we don't have enough on our plate, especially when they are the only deaf Black teacher at their school. They get asked to evaluate the books. Thank you for sharing that, Cicely. That's so important. I want to just put a pin on that for everyone in this room tonight to hear that, because we need to also think about if that happens at our school. Tim.
I think Vicki wanted me, I kind of threw in the chat about Project Lit. And so Project Lit was started by an English teacher and his students who found a need for a club with diverse stories and books. And like what Jean said, it's the students leading the charge. So it's a book club. As my students, I'm the advisor, and then my own children are also members of theirs as well. And so just a couple of books. So the students choose the books, and as a national organization, we go online and we talk. And so we've read Speak and Shout, Thug, On the Come Up, They Called Us Enemy, Dear Martin, Marrow Thieves, Hey Kiddo, They Both Die at the End, Flamer, March, Born a Crime, Stamped. And so in this sense, the students don't have to read the books. I'm not handing out 30 copies. These are students who are choosing. And so that's not really a challengeable type of a thing there. And then so we tend to get the students who want to read those books. And then we pull students in from other clubs, from the CASA club, from the GSA club, from, you know, all those types of things. And then I'm blessed enough that my superintendent comes in and our principal comes in, and then we start to have parents come in, and then we start to have other teachers come in and guidance counselors come in. And then we have this whole community. So the teacher, and I'll put him in the chat, is Jared Amato. He's the one who started this. And this all started with my daughter was in 7th grade, and we read Ghost Boys in her club. And on the way home, she said, hey, Dad, shouldn't we be embarrassed because we're white and Pop is a police officer? So if you don't know the story, right, this is a police officer, white police officer, who shoots and kills a young Black boy. And so the story revolves around other Black boys who have been killed, come back as ghosts and haunt, if you will, or try to educate people about the things that have happened. And so I'm like, all right, pull the minivan over. Here's a good time to have a conversation. This is not about you and I taking on the guilt of all the things that are happening. This is a conversation about a much bigger thing. And so at that point, we had already lost my father, but it was this conversation that we wouldn't have had without that book, right? It's a conversation as the straight, white, cisgendered male teacher. It's not me forcing this conversation on the students. This is them bringing the books up. This is them wanting to read these books. And I'm telling you, it has been, these kids have saved my soul with everything going on. And I Project Lit, I'll put Jarrett's contact info in the chat. So thanks for letting me share that.
Tim, you're amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I loved your anecdote about what your daughter said. I think that's really important that we emphasize that, talk about that.
If we're going to talk about Project Lit, then I have to get in here about Educolor.
Okay, Jean. Yeah.
All right.
Yes, please talk about Educolor.
First and foremost, Jose, I want you to know my shirt I wore today all day at the conference. I want you to know that. I represent every time I can put on that shirt, I do. And I especially do it for the conferences because it's vital. You want to know how you can help. You want to know how you can support. Get into Educolor, get into our learning network. We meet on Thursdays, but seriously, we're always bouncing our perspectives. We ask those questions that are difficult, but necessary in order to meet the cost. So yeah, you're going to have to create your own learning environment. And that includes Project Lit, that includes Disrupt Text, that includes Educolor, that includes anything that goes against the ruin of traditionalism. That's over and done with. I'm sorry, time's up, it expired. We're in a new wave, man. And so that you have to make, if you really want to say that you care, you can't say Black Lives Matter, you can't say I support you, and you never do anything to take action forward. So participating in these groups, participating and educating yourself beyond what is ever expected for you for professional development at your campus. That is seeking out professional development that relates to your kids. Educolor is that, Project Lit is that, because they envelop student choice. They envelop the student background and culture that is erased every single year.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. And
I'm gonna stop. Okay.
Well, you know what? You have like 100 people. No, well, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of people just asked how they joined. So Jose just put it in there at 8:27. So if you want to join and get involved, he put the links for Disrupt Text as well as Educolor. Thanks, Jean. So we're running out of time. Ricardo, you might be the last question. Let's see. Ricardo, would love to hear from you.
Hello, one moment. Hi, my name is Ricardo, and I work in a high school in Washington, D.C. And I am also an author, and I speak in Spanish. And, I've been watching this discussion. It is so interesting. So one thing that I was wondering is a very hot topic, but whenever they, ban books, I've just begun to wonder, whenever I started working at my school, I've seen so many books that, are no longer there. And there's a lot of new books that are being brought in, and a lot of new books are being ordered. And so whenever, people review the books and books are, proposed, but I'm just wondering, what is fascinating me is the impact on society. So, they order books, they bring them in, and I really prefer to advocate books that, are really a hot topic now. And so I would prefer books, like for drama and things like that. And so I'm just kind of curious, because students, I want them involved. And so at the same time, I really want to show, what really happens to students and how they identify. And so I really want, for them to, if they want to dress, like a woman, whatever way they want to express themselves. If they're involved in a gay or lesbian group, I just want them to be able to be themselves. I do not want them to be afraid. But then whenever we order books, maybe, the English department comes in, they, everyone reviews the books. And a lot of times, a lot of books are gone. And so the department, has to order more books. And so I'm just kind of wondering exactly, what we're, we can look at, I'm really looking forward to, the reading project.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm going to build in the response with concluding remarks because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But so I'm going to have Fred answer that and then give us his concluding remarks, because it's such a great question. And I really appreciate you, Ricardo, for asking that. So Fred, I'm going to give you a job, which is two jobs, which is to address Ricardo's question the best you can. And then I'm going to go Fred, Jean, and then Jose with just final remarks for everyone. And I just want to say, I'm so sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions and points. We are going to save the chat. And I think I always do this to Vicky. We're going to do this again. I think we have to. We need a part 2. So we'll do a part 2. I'm doing this on record. So Vicky's saying yes. Great. Okay. So Fred, Jean, and then Jose, concluding remarks. And I just want to thank you for staying a couple extra minutes with us tonight. I know it's been a long winter and I appreciate your time. So Fred, Jean, and then Jose.
Yeah, Sarah, I love that. You're such an educator. You were like making sure we knew a few times how the order was supposed to go. But I'm really big on not stepping into territory when I'm not an expert. So in terms of Ricardo's question, I don't want to give wrong information or give like a concept that is not applicable. So I think that Jean and Jose would be better served from being in the schools. I write the things and I'm just hoping that they actually get them there. So I'm gonna leave that to them. But in terms of concluding remarks, I echo what I said earlier. I echo what Jose said. I echo what Jean said. You got to get involved. You got to get into this thing, right? Like, at the end of the day, you can read all the books. You can read every book that I write, that Ibram writes, that Hannah Nicole. You can read all the books, but if you don't actually put in the work, get into practice, take action, then you are complicit in what you obviously see is a far right-wing fascist movement that's growing, and not growing in rhetoric, but growing in action, because quite frankly, our books are pulled from the shelves. And next thing you know, other things we pulled out of the curriculum, other conversations we pulled, and we already frankly weren't having the conversations enough in the first place. So that's my last thought, is that everybody on here, I know it's not easy, right? I know it takes courage, but sometimes having courage is not about doing the thing that, is like, oh, this is the obvious thing I should do. I should protest against my school. No, sometimes having courage is finding unique ways to get involved. And all of us can do that. So find your own unique way to use your access, your privilege, to get involved in this, because if not, then you're complicit and enabling, quite frankly.
Thank you, Fred. That's so important. Jean.
I'm gonna try to wrap it up. I promise you I'm gonna be quick about it. But here's the thing. Learning, when you're truly committed to learning, it's going to be difficult. Okay. When I couldn't excel with algebra, it hurt my head at first, okay? But then once I got the right teacher, I got the right conditioning, but the grass, so to speak, on the side of the fence of mathematics was watered and nourished, I started to grow. So I say this, you got to push through the dirt in your life, and racism is our dirt. Prejudice and discrimination is our dirt. There ain't no easy way to get through it. We're not going to sing Kumbaya and hold hands and be all copacetic. No, we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to dig through the dirt. This is a seed that we have planted in our country. In order to make it go away, we got to bring the truth to the light. And banning books is not bringing the truth to the light. That's a coward's way. You're showing me already that you're guilty because you want to hush. People that speak the truth, they ain't worried about book bans. They're not, the truth shall set you free, okay? And so I say that to say, you're going to be uncomfortable. Your safe space is going to be rocked. So what? Turn it into a brave space, You're going to have to move. You're going to have to take action. You can't just sit there and say, oh, but I want it this way. You got to cuddle me and hold me like this. No, this is a dogfight. We are in a dogfight right now, and you don't go to no dogfight holding daisies and throwing it out and saying, be nice to me. No, you go to a dogfight ready to fight. So you got to get your sleeves pushed up. You got to push through the dirt, and we're going to have to take action and make change. So that's what I will leave everyone with.
I'm so glad this was recorded. I might play your audio every morning when I wake up, because that was so inspirational. Thank you, Jean. Jose.
Last but certainly not least, given that, I think I just want to throw a big old thank you to everybody on this call. The work that you are doing, whether you're in your classrooms, communities, any space where two or more of you are gathered, that is powerful work. The fact that you even attended, I mean, you asked Vicky, you asked Sari, like they asked me straight up, like, can you come to this thing? It was never a matter of if, but when, because I know the power of teachers because I've been one and I'm a parent now. And I implore each and every one of you to continue the work of not just doing this work for our marginalized children, though unapologetically you are doing it for our Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, Native American, LGBTQIA+, our poor folks, you name them, we get them. We are trying to include and broaden this thing we call an American democracy. There's a lot of credit that's often given to soldiers, to presidents, to government official. But when you ask me, I consistently ask everyone to think about what it means for teachers to be the vanguards of what we want to see as a truly representative democracy. When enslaved people were emancipated through Reconstruction, they consistently voted for public schooling to be open to every single body, right? Like we don't give props to Dewey, we give props to those folks because they made it for everybody. And so the work that you are doing is legacy work. It is powerful work. It is work that is necessary for our things to keep going. And I know it feels hard right now, but those of us who are consistently fighting for you to do this work, it also means that you get to do this work for our children who are looking up to you to tell them what America is actually going to be. So I thank you all for being part of this thing that we're doing right here. And I welcome you, if you haven't already, to the fight that we're going to continue to fight to make sure this thing works for everybody.
Thank you so much, Jose. And we're going to have a book raffle. I just want to say that I am so inspired by our panelists, Fred, Jean, and Jose, every day. And so when they said they would do this panel, I was so excited. And I'm excited we're going to do it again. And just seeing so many educators and supporters of educators in this Zoom room tonight, I'm like ready to double down in the fight. And my concluding thoughts and remarks are, they're coming after us teachers for a reason. If they didn't think we had power and that they didn't think we were a threat, they wouldn't be coming after our public schools and our schools in general and our teachers. So let's keep that in mind. So I love the idea that even just having a conversation like this is a form of activism. Even thinking about and talking about with another person, you're doing something.